Hello, my name is Chris Snipes, and you are listening to The Melt. Transhumanism and transgenderism are some of the biggest buzzwords going right now and have been for the past 4 or 5 years. They both tend to attract controversy, but for different reasons. Transhumanism does because it calls into question not only what it means to be human, but how far we are willing to go in welcoming technology into our lives and into our bodies. With an increase in convenience comes a decrease in autonomy. Can a person's consciousness in all of its complexity and nuance ever really be translated into binary code and achieve sentience? I think not. Can a person's consciousness be translated into a complex enough sequence of ones and zeros to be convinced into a simulated thinking sequence that itself is sentient? Perhaps, but it's still an imitation. Information is not the only content of a human being. Context is at least half of the equation, and that can never be effectively simulated. And where the real improvisation that defines a human comes into play is how context and circumstance play out. Whatever the case, the foundation that seems to inspire transhumanists is a fundamental disconnection between the mind and the body. And this is where the world of the transhumanist and the transgenderist overlap. They both espouse a disconnection, even a radical alienation between the mind and the body. Gender dysphoria pre-2013 was recognized as a mental disorder. Now it is seen quite differently. Now it's perfectly acceptable to most of society for someone to purport to feel like a different gender or even a different species than the body that they were born into. This is fertile ground to sow the concepts of transhumanism in. An unassailable dissatisfaction with the biological context that one is born into, and the fact that one is born into a biological context at all. Today's guest, Natalie Donna, has a podcast called Deep Dystopian Dives that attempts to grapple with some of these concepts and much more. We were put on each other's radar by a guest that we had both had on our podcasts, David Seaman, both about Pizzagate and both censored on YouTube. I start off the conversation by asking Natalie what inspired her to start podcasting.
What happened was I guess when Trump got elected, I sort of felt a cosmic shift. And I want to make it clear that I don't think anything about Trump other than he's a television personality and has sort of been the butt of a joke for, I guess, since the 80s. So I think like a tear in the universe or something might have happened, not because of Trump, but just like reality just sort of started becoming very surreal. And I had some personal experiences with some people telling me, and this was the big intro for me into this stuff, was for people telling me that, they decided that they were the opposite sex. And I thought it was interesting and weird, and it didn't jive with me so much. It didn't make sense. So I kind of had to just look into that whole topic. And that's kind of how I started. I had a different YouTube channel before that was more focused on what we would, I guess, call like radical feminist content. And I really just did a lot of research into where these terms were coming from, things like gender identity, and I don't know if this is the true genesis of the term, but gender identity seems to have been produced by a very small sort of group of men uh, in the 90s to describe what they were. They weren't transsexual anymore, they were transgender. So yeah, that's sort of what kicked it off. And then I kind of put that topic to rest, and I was like, oh, good, I can finally, kind of move on with my life. Because I have an obsessive personality, and I'll just do research if something's kind of sticks out to me, or it's weird, or I don't know. I like to know things, or think that I know things.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I put it to bed, and then 2020 hit, and yeah, COVID. And so, and that opened just a whole new can of worms. And I sort of remembered a long time ago, and you probably remember this, early YouTube, a lot of it was conspiracy related. You'd see these really wild videos, look at this Rihanna video, she's a satanic, she's in the satanic cabal. And I'd be like, whatever. Like, I think it's kind of a stretch maybe. But when you start seeing the symbols repeat themselves over and over again, you're kind of like, well, maybe there is something to what's going on here. And so that's sort of the genesis of this new podcast. But yeah, covering lots of things, COVID related, or corruption. I'm very interested in corruption and just how it works, and where it comes from. It's an interesting question, like a philosophical kind of question. Does power corrupt, or is power corruption? That kind of philosophical mind sort of, I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
I think they're inextricably entwined. I think in order to get to a certain point of power, you have to make a choice. There's a fork in the road, whether you want to, literally sell your soul and keep going on the same arc of power that you are headed in the direction of, or you just never, you stay a rung below that.
Right.
Yeah. So I think I think all politics, all power is corrupt in some regard or another, whether that be some sort of satanic secret society, or whether it just be having a level of knowledge that those below you do not have. I think there is a step that people take that you can't undo that. Once you get past a certain point, you're in the club, so to speak. Yeah. So I think once anybody is in the position of running for president, they're already bought and sold.
Yeah, but think also too, like, right, the mindset of wanting to be the president.
Exactly.
Of thinking that you know what's best. But I also think the president is sort of the consolation prize of, if Joe Biden's election is any indication, it's sort of like, okay, you made it this long, buddy. Here you go, because it's a title, and I don't think it has as much power as people seem to think it does.
Exactly. It's the public face of something, of the machinations that are much more deeply covered up, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the only way that somebody like Biden could even be seen as a legitimate candidate, and I'm not a political person by any means. I think
neither.
Politics slow human evolution, but is that he's running against somebody who is so despised, like as Trump. Yeah.
People didn't vote for Biden. They voted against Trump.
Exactly.
So,
exactly. Yeah. Well, going back to the COVID thing too, it's interesting. It's such an ingenious divide and conquer tactic, because they made it, I mean, everything it seems like in America gets to the point where it boils down to being politicized. So it became a situation where if you question the narrative of COVID and maybe the motivations for the way that it was being disproportionately handled, you were automatically on the side of Trump, because those were the same people that were coming out and demonstrating, talking bad against Fauci, putting their fists.
Fauci has been a lying person.
Absolutely.
since the AIDS situation.
Yeah. Exactly.
That was some of the research that I uncovered with that, where I had no idea, because I grew up a little bit later. We were terrified of getting it, right? I mean, as a teenager, that was like, oh my God, you're going to die if you get that. You better do safe stuff. And I'm all for safe sex, okay? that's a whole nother topic. But
Sure.
he ended up killing people with AZT. And yeah, I just think that was sort of a smaller, it runs parallel to what we're seeing here. Same playbook,
Exactly.
bigger. Yeah.
But people were willing to accept every syllable that came out of his mouth because Trump was against him. Trump was butting heads with him. So then it became a partisan issue. Like, whose side are you on? Nobody, even if Trump was talking sense about something, which every once in a while he did, even during the debates between him and Biden, but nobody on the side of those people who would call themselves liberals or Democrats or leftists or whatever would ever condescend to, think that anything that Trump could say or anybody that supported Trump had any sense about them whatsoever. So it became, again, this huge divide and conquer thing that was so seamless,
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you questioned anything about COVID, the legitimacy of it, the way it was being handled, anything, you might as well just automatically have this tattoo on your head that says right-wing conspiracy theorist. Yeah, it's ridiculous. So simplistic.
Yeah, and it's a tactic. It's an old one used to discredit people with many different topics. We could even, I haven't done enough research into this, but the climate change thing seems a little, so now it's sort of done this. I'm a little bit new to the conspiracy mythos, if you will. There's lots of different areas that you can go out into that are all very fascinating. But I think I lost track of what I was saying there.
That's okay.
Yeah. So basically, yeah, the thing with the United States, where also I didn't live here for quite some time. So it was also a reverse culture shock when I came back, and I did not realize how divided everybody was.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I was like, oh, that's, that can't be. But yeah, everyone, even in just 6 years, of me being gone,
sure,
became sort of rabidly this or that, and been pigeonholed. Right. Oh, the conspiracy thing being used to defame people. Right. So they'll take any idea that's against the mainstream narrative, and they'll be like, "That's a crazy conspiracy theory," to make it look less legitimate. Exactly. The questioning of the narrative. Which I think is important, to question mainstream narratives. And I felt like we were doing that at some point.
Exactly.
But I don't know what has happened.
Well, I think another legitimate thing that Trump brought up and pointed out was fake news. And that became, the only way that people thought about that was in the context of, well, he just doesn't like news that is against him. But he was calling out CNN and all these mainstream news networks. And I think that was spot on. I think that is fake news. I mean, anything that has an agenda and that's corporate sponsored and is totally biased, that's not news. Oh, yeah. That's something else.
And then you've got Anderson Cooper.
Yes.
Who's totally, in my mind, an asset of the intelligence apparatus.
Absolutely.
I don't know how. I made a really short video about him. He studied in Vietnam. He was in a CIA program. It's just all too convenient. And then you've got the weird Cuomo brothers, where you're like, why is one on TV and the other one, a politician? And then you just start to think like, well, okay, all these people are in this echelon of society that I'm not. They're very well connected, and it's not a huge group, so
no, that's the thing. Yeah. People who don't buy just the concept of conspiracy theory and lump it all together like it's a mental illness or something. A lot of the big excuse that they like to use is that, well, humans just aren't that competent. They're not organized enough to pull something like that off. But I think what they're not realizing is that there aren't that many people pulling it off. It's mostly a few people setting things into motion and a lot of yes men around them that are on a need to
A
know
lot of
basis.
useful idiots,
Yes,
basically. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think it's very easy if like, okay, here's this person and they fit our agenda, they are with our narrative, so we're going to let them have a big, big voice. And I think there is, I mean, the New York Times is the fakest news I've seen. I mean, for a while there with, the so-called trans debate, it was like every day there was a story. Every day. And it's like, isn't there other stuff you can report on? And we would always joke in sort of the radical feminist realm where we're like, well, if they even tried to name how many women, get murdered a year, it would be pretty hard. It would be pretty difficult. So yeah, it would. I just started noticing that and being like, yeah, wow. And I can't even listen to NPR anymore.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
it was the last 4 years, totally reality sort of upended itself. And I, sort of discovered just lots of things that I really didn't have any idea about. And I'm still discovering more stuff about lots of different narratives out there. And so, yeah, I think that's why Trump succeeded, was because he knew an audience. He had found a niche, of people who were disenfranchised and spoke pretty well to them.
Yeah. I mean, he wasn't polite. He spoke his mind, which is odd for a politician because usually they're kissing ass constantly. So
Hmm.
their opinions and what they have to say about things fluctuate so much depending on their public ratings. And Trump would just come out and say whatever the fuck he felt. And
And
I kind of,
sometimes it was cringy, and other times
yes,
you're like, hey, wait a minute, okay.
yeah, exactly.
It was a very strange relationship we all developed with a TV snake oil salesman,
Yeah,
basically.
for
You
sure.
know,
It's like tabloid headlines. Like every once in a while you see one and go, "Well, yeah, that sounds about right." But because it's from a tabloid, most people aren't going to pay any attention to it and write it off as nonsense.
hmm.
That's what Trump was, a live,
Yeah,
real-time tabloid headline in a sense.
yeah, and like a world WWE style
Hmm.
heel.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. So yeah, you've got Trump, who I think is a scapegoat and probably is playing his role. If we think that there is a group of people doing all of this, I'm not into like the QAnon stuff or any of that. Um, I I just see him as a TV personality, and one who's really, he's egomaniacal. So the whole situation, I don't know if you watched Michael Moore's documentary about it. His theory is that Trump ran for president because he was angry that someone got higher ratings than him at some point. That was Michael Moore's theory. Let's talk about a conspiracy theory. I mean, Michael Moore, again, it's sort of, I'll just watch his stuff to kind of see where he's at, and take him with a grain of salt too. But yeah, I thought that was kind of funny to think like, oh, I'm so mad, I'm gonna run for president.
Yeah, exactly. I truly don't know why he ran for president, but I don't, that doesn't sound right to me. The
I have
Michael
no
Moore
idea.
explanation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Well,
so your podcast, Dystopian Deep Dives, the main subject matter that was driving you to do that was transgenderism.
at the very beginning, yeah, and also just a sex trafficking too, actually, because what happened was when I started researching about transgenderism, I found the only thing online saying anything different was a Reddit community called Gender Critical, which is no longer there. Reddit took it down, I think it was sometime last year, maybe the year before that. It was obliterated, erased. And it was an amazing resource because you had all of these women with all of these really interesting things to say, great links, lots of research that they had done about the statistics that they throw out and things like this. And so it started there, and I just couldn't put the topic down. And then I kind of started reading all of these radical feminist texts, but from like the 70s. I decided I would give myself a college course in, radical feminist literature or whatever. And so I ended up reading all this stuff, and I was like, this stuff I never even thought about it before, because in the 90s, things were kind of cool. And like, I didn't feel like I needed something like that. But I started getting really interested in things like sex trafficking, things like prostitution, or the Orwellian term we know now, sex work, and just seeing all of these things. And it goes all the way up to the UN. It's a global agenda. It's very interesting how these things are all interconnected and related. And I had no idea. And so after, 4 or 5 years now, I decided, like I was going to move into some other topics. And COVID became one of my newer obsessions. Although I'd say it's waning a little bit, because who doesn't have fatigue by now? I think that's the point of these masks, to remind us all that this is still going on for some reason.
No shit.
I have no idea why it's still... but I also want to make it clear that, like, I haven't watched television or had a television, I think, for about 15 years or something. I was like, if I want to watch a show, I'll just stream it on the internet. What am I gonna? Why would I have a TV?
Sure. You mean a TV that like got stations and broadcast networks? And stuff like that.
Exactly.
Yeah, same here. A TV is a monitor for my DVD player, or for whatever streaming service I have.
Right.
Yeah. So what was the compelling dynamic about transgenderism that drove you to it, that made you want to grapple with it?
I thought it was based in sexism. I thought I was, because again, I grew up in like the late 90s. It just seemed like a free time where you could really do, a lot of stuff. It was pretty fun. And I have no problem with men wanting to express themselves, wearing nail polish or makeup or whatever. I really don't care. But when you start saying that these men are women, I think that's a problem. And a lot of them embody what I would call sexual stereotypes, which is actually another term for gender. So, or it was, traditionally speaking, in like the anthropology sort of realm, that's what gender is. It's a sexual stereotype. So I would see like it sort of just reinforcing these sexual stereotypes. And I think that's why I was like, wait, there's something off here. You're not, you're not a woman because you want to do those things. It's just, you just want to express yourself in a certain way. And that's totally fine. I really don't have an issue with that. And we didn't seem to be talking about this at all. And that was the other thing, where I was like, wait a minute, like what? I sort of started noticing it on Tumblr. And I was like, is this like a psyop? Like, are these, like, who are these, all these weird accounts that are like, I'm a they, them, or a Zer, or like whatever. It was very strange. And so I just, the manipulation of language, and what I see is something that really just does enforce sexual stereotypes, which I'm not into. I don't want anyone to have to be in a box. I really don't. And I see it as putting yourself in another box, ultimately.
Yeah, there's a difference between cross-dressing and then and calling yourself a woman suddenly, and not having lived a woman's life your entire existence, but then all of a sudden you just get to slide into that like a walk-in into that identity, and not have to have gone through the potential hell or confusion or whatever that a woman may have experienced as they were growing up.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then you just are bequeathed with a gender that I want to
That
say
you
that you didn't
want,
earn.
that
Yeah. Yeah.
you feel inside, and it does that thing where it's, oh, okay, you've got the mind body dichotomy. And personally, and this is my own personal belief, I don't think there's a separation. I think we are our minds are our bodies. It's our brain, it's our body part. I think, yeah, okay, and they'll talk about like gendered souls and things like this, and I'm like, well, I don't know anything about that. I mean, and if you truly are feeling disconnected from your body in that way, it could be something that you want to. I don't think you should have to treat with surgery or anything like that. It might be something talk therapy should work on. I don't know. If you're really feeling that disconnected from your body, I think that's an issue. But I also think the disconnection from the body is something that's being pushed heavily. Transgenderism is just sort of the top layer of like the transhumanist cake or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, so because their whole position basically is that they think the human body is it's inadequate, it's not good enough. And whatever you believe in, evolution, God, I don't know, our bodies seem to be pretty amazing if you're an
Absolutely.
able-bodied person.
Well,
Yeah.
and no matter who you are, if you're a thinking, self-reflective person, it's just weird to be in a body anyway, regardless of the gender. It's,
Yeah.
if I think that, I'm a, I believe in souls, I believe in incarnations, I believe in an afterlife, not tethered to any sort of, religion or a concrete philosophy.
Specific, right.
Yeah, but I think that we're more than our bodies. That doesn't mean that we should rush to transcend them or to leave them or anything like that. But I think there are lessons to be learned while we're here. And in that time, if you sit around and do any amount of reflection about it, or psychedelics, or whatever it is, whatever avenue you choose to take, at some point it's going to be strange to be in a body, because it's just a strange reality to navigate.
For sure.
But
You get into like an existential kind of
yeah,
crisis.
possibly, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not so much a crisis, but just a question of like, yeah, what is the meaning of this?
What is this
Yeah, of
meat
course.
suit I'm wearing?
Yeah, yeah. Exactly.
So it is, and it's the thing that I find kind of jarring about it is that we're not allowed to question it, or
Yeah.
to delve deeper into it, or reflect on it, or have any criticisms about it.
Yeah, that was the other thing that I was like, wait. So the only area I can find on the internet is this weird Reddit group. I can't find anyone else discussing this critically at all. It's all just the party line. And it's kind of weird. Like, why would that be part of it? I mean, speaking politically, the Democrats are super into it. So it's strange. It's like, well, why are they pushing this stuff? I think it has to be coming from somewhere. I don't know.
Yeah. I think it takes root in the leftist sort of Democrat liberal mindset, because we're not supposed to oppress anybody, or even come off or make anybody feel oppressed about anything. So we can't question certain groups of people. We can't question Muslim doctrine, or why anybody would question their gender, or trust women. No, regardless of who, they just trust them because they have breasts.
Trust Oprah.
Yes, exactly. I think it's
Trust
more
Hillary
like
Clinton. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. Which I
thinking
think
of some of my least favorite.
absolutely. Just because they have breasts, just because they're women, which I think it's more of a case by case basis, no matter what gender you are. Like
Oh, for sure.
Trust trustworthy people, no matter who they are, not just because they're this or that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes. So it's kind of like as you said, sort of like a gateway drug to transhumanism.
Mm.
And what are your
Yeah,
thoughts on
because
that?
oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, because one of the major players in this, what I guess is like kind of a small conspiracy to, I believe, to just get into women's bathrooms. Sorry, I read this document from that they produced. So they have these conferences, like anyone, like a Star Trek conference, anything. So they have these special interest conferences, but the thing is with these guys is that they're very rich and very powerful. So you've got Martine Rothblatt, who is the richest female CEO, or the whatever, but he's a dude. And he created a robot that, is, I guess, like his, looks like his wife. And he was part of creating this document that I found called the International Bill of Gender Rights. This was produced in the 90s. And he's a major futurist and a major transhumanist. So once you start kind of seeing the people involved, Pritzker is another really big one. And they're, huge pharmaceutical family as well. You've got the Obama connection with that. I mean, it just sort of goes into this, okay, you've got the transhumanists idea of like, your body, it's not great. You could do better. Like, you might as well just upload your consciousness into the cloud, which isn't, that's bodily death. It would be probably. Would be maybe a Matrix kind of situation. And I didn't really think that much about futurists or transhumanism even before this, but I did read Ray Kurzweil a long time ago talking about the singularity.
Yes.
And that idea always freaked me out. And I'm like, well, why are they doing this? What is it? What I'm looking around, I'm looking at the technology we have. I'm pretty okay with it. I don't know why they continue. And I think it is sort of just this weird path of self-annihilation. Mary Daly, who was a radical feminist philosopher, talks about that. If you want to talk about patriarchy with like a big P, it is kind of a death cult.
Yeah, for sure.
So, yeah, the transhumanist stuff is just too wild for me. I just see the propaganda surrounding it. It's not even pre-programming anymore. It's just, it's so in your face.
Well, it's like it's taking advantage also of all the predictive programming of all the sci-fi movies that we've been watching for the last 2 decades.
Right.
Too, it's like it's presented as this, it's going to be so cool. We can do this and that and the other, but it's almost co-opting the afterlife in a sense. Like,
Ooh.
No, you don't get to leave your body. I don't know. I mean, has anybody thought that out? Like, there's this series.
How would it be sustainable? Like, honestly, okay, with these machines, who's going to run the machines? I guess the machines are going to run the machines, and it'll be like a Matrix type world, I suppose.
But I mean, how could that be you? How could it be you? It's not you. It's a bad Xerox of you. Like, how your soul, I do believe that there's something inside that leaves your body when you die.
Yeah.
How is that? I mean, your soul's just going to be waving at the computer that your copy is in as it goes on to bigger and better things. Like, what is this stupid little binary code version of yourself? Like,
yeah,
what is it?
I mean,
what's the use of it? I don't understand.
The thing with transhumanism is that they really, really hate, I guess, what I would call like the natural order of things: death, decay, entropy. They don't like it. Everything about this corporal world, it's not palatable. And so they, create all these, and of course it's under the guise of like, oh, we're going to help disabled people and we're going to do this. And I'm sure they might, but I don't know. I have not seen them and their strange, weird projects work out well for the rest of us in the past. So I also think this technology, that's another point, is that it will not be available to me or you, the plebes. it's very funny to me. I'm like, really, you really think like, I mean, eventually if it keeps going, yeah, like any technology, it'll get cheaper and then maybe, but yeah, it won't be available to the regular people.
Absolutely. I mean, at the very least, like we'll get they talk about wearables now, but eventually that will become embeddables. We'll get the embeddables. So
Ugh.
we'll get the surveillance
It's
aspect of all of this technology.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Living in a
Yeah, that's
world.
the whole point.
Yeah, absolutely. Easy to control the masses that way.
I was walking by an apartment building the other night and I saw a woman exercising alone in her apartment building and I was like, "Oh, they really did figure out how to put everybody into a little box and stay in that little box with the COVID thing." It's very interesting to me. I don't know how I wouldn't say immune, but
I would. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what it is about. Maybe it's my personality type. I don't know, but yeah, none of this stuff is something I'm not gung ho about any of it.
Well, you
Um,
just question. I mean, it doesn't take much questioning to see that there's something going on here that's nefarious. I mean,
yeah,
of all of this hubbub for a virus where there's a 99.9% survival rate, like, what the fuck, people? Like,
they still don't.
seriously.
Yeah, they still don't even seem to mention that. And then when you do mention it, oh, that's fake news. You're a liar.
Exactly. Yeah, you're
And I'm like,
conveniently.
but all the numbers they've been inflated, and there's total evidence of them inflating these death counts.
And the PCR
Um,
tests are
oh
totally
God.
inaccurate.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. You can't set the threshold higher than like 30 something. And they're being set at 40 in some cases.
yeah. So they're like testing Coke bottles and they're turning out positive for COVID. I mean,
Or you like a
it's
papaya or something,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah, because they never isolated the thing. Just like HIV, actually.
For sure, for
So
sure. I think that's why they chose now to, and maybe, I don't know, who knows, maybe this was in the works. I mean, I know it was in the works years and years and years ago, but this particular opportunity to sort of push the Great Reset is because people have just fallen for the narrative hook, line, and sinker without question. So that I think that they're probably going like, well, shit, that was easy.
yeah,
Let's go. Let's roll out the
it
Great
was.
Reset a little ahead of time.
It was easy for us to flip that switch for sure. And it's have you ever seen that old video where someone goes into an elevator and they're all facing a strange way and the guy is like, I don't know what I should do, and eventually he just follows the group, like this herd mentality kind of thing. And yeah, people want friends. They don't want to isolate themselves. They don't want to be thought of as crazy. So I think there are some people that are probably going along with it that they don't really want to, but they'll never tell anyone that. And they're just sort of doing like a wait and see. But I don't know if we have time to wait and see with these people because they really seem to want to erase humanity,
I agree.
or the components of what we think of as humanity. Just going to see like a live music event, or uh, spending time with our friends and family, like that's mandated.
Exactly.
That's wild.
It
and
is.
and then you see a lot of people practicing. So the further this has gone on, right, we've almost hit a year. um the further this has gone on, I see a lot of very like hypocritical behavior surrounding it, where they're like, well, this person's in my pod, so okay. Or like they'll like say, oh, why would you travel somewhere? I'm like, well, didn't you have some people over for the holidays? Like, why are you telling me? It's sort of this trickle down effect of like a Nancy Pelosi or something, like do as I say and not as I do. And now everyone's embodying this behavior. It's just it's blowing my mind. I never really thought I would. And also, yeah, I'm in Philadelphia, and I I would say that I was in some punk-ish scenes, some like, cool. It was just for the music for me, but people who call themselves,
Rebels,
politically,
open-minded.
yeah, rebels,
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah, thank you. And you see them totally going along with it. And all of
Yeah.
those riots, all of those protests, they're doing this. And that's a different topic, but they're all wearing the masks while they're doing it in during the summertime riots.
They
And I
never
was
put
just
two and
like,
two together.
really, guys? Like, it's the same people.
Exactly.
It's the
These are the
same.
motherfuckers that you were. Those are the 1% that you were protesting a couple of summers ago. The
Right.
Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street. Those are the same motherfuckers. The same
For sure.
guys.
For sure.
God.
It's so weird. I don't understand. I feel really things are so polarized, and I don't relate to. I mean, I've definitely lost a couple of friends
Yeah.
during this.
Same here.
And I was losing friends too before with the trans stuff. People don't people don't like that. And they're really, really into. That's another, I guess, like kind of a cult. You have the Church of COVID where you're wearing a mask, and okay, you're going to go into the restaurant with the mask on, but the second you sit down, it's okay. You're fine. That's crazy. You're all practicing weird superstitious beliefs now. Because those things, they don't do anything, and in fact, I think they're probably pretty dangerous, but that's just an intuition. I don't think you should probably breathe in the air that you're breathing out. It's probably
It's wear a
that's just
germ
basic.
diaper on your face.
Ugh. They make me sweat the second I put it on. I'm like, ugh, and my skin will break out. It's just the worst.
Yeah, it's horrible for you.
And I think it also makes people like question their own health too. That's like a big.
I think that another, talking about dividing and conquering and how going along with this has sort of become the left thing to do. I think that goes hand in hand with not wanting to offend people. Like when you have the narrative of you're wearing this for other people, you're not wearing it for yourself. You're wearing it to protect other people. That's totally the party line of the left, is like you're standing up for the oppressed. You're standing up to help other people in life. And that, of course, that's a noble thing in and of itself, written on paper. But when you apply it to a situation like that, then if you're the person that is going against the grain and saying that I'm not going to wear a fucking mask, then you get seen as a selfish, inconsiderate person. Yeah, a psychopath. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, they had that great propaganda piece last year saying people not wearing masks were all psychopaths. I think that's part of a kind of masochism of what we would call the left. It's kind of fascinating. Yeah, like I said, I was really apolitical for a really long time in my life. I just was like, I don't need any of that. Like, I have music and I like movies and it doesn't matter. But yeah, it's sort of now I'm totally disgusted with the rhetoric on the left. And, at least I kind of understand the GOP. I'm like, I kind of get what you guys are all about. But there's just something more insidious about what the Democrats seem to be doing. And I think they're I think all politicians are corrupt, right? So, I don't think it's like a right left thing, but their policies just seem. And they played this game, right? With everybody, this psychological game to put everyone in a corner. Like, oh, you don't want to wear a mask and you question the whole narrative. Okay, well, then I guess you're a Trump voter and you're evil, you're deplorable or whatever. I was like, I've never even voted.
Yeah, exactly.
I have not voted ever. Like, part of me, it's just because I don't want to get called in for jury duty, but
yeah, that's easy to get out of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once they asked you the question, have you ever had any run-ins with cops, or do you have a bad attitude about cops, and you say yes, then you're dismissed.
Mm. I'll keep that in mind if it ever happens.
Yes. Yeah, it is interesting to see, and that's the thing too. So if somebody overheard us having this discussion, talking about being critical of the left or of Democrats, then of course we're automatically, because there's only two choices in life,
Right.
we're
You want
automatically going
Coke
to
or
be,
Pepsi?
yeah, we're going to be lumped into so you're a Trump supporter, you're a right winger, like, as if that's all there is in life. There's only two ways to go. There's only two directions. And I think that's so simplistic and childlike.
And I think it's part of the program. I mean,
Of course.
yeah, the American political system and the way things seem to work in America, I mean, not just in politics, but yeah, like the Coke or Pepsi situation where you have this weird false dichotomy constantly in this country on anything really. It's And I think part of that is, a very good strategy for people to be, yeah, divide and conquer. Um, and it's so blatant. And I think the thing with like so-called conspiracy theorists, a lot of them uh, don't see that dichotomy. They're like, they're all bad. So I think that's kind of why I fell into this realm, because it seemed to be the only place where like I could question anything. Um,
On your
and yeah,
podcast, you mean?
yeah, just yeah, the sort of conspiracy minded topics or whatever, because at least those people have, they know what the Federal Reserve is, and they know what Gates has been up to, and they know all about the eugenicists and all of that stuff. And if you talk to, I don't know, I don't want to say anything disparaging, but like normies, they're like, "What are you talking about? I'm going to vote for Biden." Like, okay,
Yeah, exactly.
that's cool.
Have you seen
Have fun.
the video compilations of him sniffing little girls' hair? I mean,
Oh
that
yeah.
should be the only deal
Oh yeah.
breaker.
Oh, but I mean, and there was that whole. I did a video about that too. I think it's on that channel, like the Me Too hypocrisy with that woman, Tara Reid, that came forward. And she was like, hey, this happened to me with Joe Biden. And they didn't do anything because, they were politically beholden to him. That's crazy.
Yeah. If you're not willing to question your own ideology, the same one that you're getting all puffy chested about, then you're a flimsy shitheel. I mean, like you've got to, first of all, questioning is it an intrinsic part of critical thinking, which is a very good tool to have if you're going to navigate this complicated life. But if you can't apply that to your own deal, if you can't apply that to your own thing first, I mean, you should have already, first of all, you should have already gone through that process of weeding out your own ideology that you're signing up for, to
Right.
make sure that it doesn't have a leaky bucket there, But if you haven't even gone through that, how can you apply that to somebody else selectively, It's so ridiculous.
Well, I've noticed, and perhaps Corona narrative is a blessing in disguise. Like, I was like, wow, I'm looking around and I didn't know that integrity, that so few people had that value. It's really, I really had no idea.
Yeah. Yeah, it's odd, isn't it? It's hard sometimes not to be on a Tinder day, to not be sort of very disappointed, fundamentally disappointed by that. In humanity, come on.
Yeah, no, for real.
Yeah.
And so, but then I find glimmers of hope. I find pretty well-connected people saying the same things I am, more powerful, more well-connected kinds of people.
Yeah.
Concerning like the Corona thing, or even the trans stuff. So it gives me a little bit of hope. Because,
Absolutely.
and I think that's why the people who have maybe operated this whole thing are so, you're right. They're like, oh, wow, that was easy. They're like gleefully happy. They didn't think people it would be so easy to manipulate people, maybe. But it was just amazing.
Yeah,
So
yeah, for
they're
sure.
pretty excited.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, first of all, I think people that just kind of go along with the program
Hmm.
spend a lot of time in front of media, and that's where they get most of their world experiences. But now, especially under this lockdown, and we're supposed to stay separate from one another and not gather, people who already did that are doing it even more. So they are
Right.
getting a steady diet of fear and,
Yes.
yeah, division, and so they're just digesting it hook, line, and sinker without even questioning it. Because that's all. I mean, I don't even know where you could go to on TV where there would be somebody questioning that narrative.
I have no idea. Yeah, I guess Fox.
Yeah. Okay.
I
Sure.
I mean, like, I'm kind of like, I sometimes, Tucker Carlson is a guilty pleasure, but only
Yeah.
because he looks like Sam the Eagle from the Muppets. That like face he does, you
Yeah.
know?
I could see that.
I'm just like, oh wow. But yeah, I think, but it's kind of a controlled opposition situation where they'll sort of, say a little bit, but it's going to be. But then you get all the red scaring,
Yeah. Well,
all the weird, yeah,
that's the thing too. Nobody is going to go there anyway because that's Fox News. So you might as well
right.
be a Trump supporter and then by association a right-wing conspiracy theorist.
I'm simply entertained by Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, I am
That's
too.
the only reason why I'm also entertained by Trump. I think the thing with me is that I see just the absurdity in all of this. And I'm living some sort of surrealist play. Like we've all dropped into some weird like Kafka novel or
Yeah, yeah.
something,
Yeah,
you
that's
know?
just everything's just flipped around, bizarro world.
And if I don't have a sense of humor about this stuff, then I don't think I would be doing as well as I am mentally,
For
because
sure.
and that's the other thing I think people. So I was trying to make this kind of found footage thing called Trapped in the Screen. And I think you're right. People who were already doing this, consuming this stuff, are now doing it a lot more. Um, and it's not just the TV, or you have these powerful computers everyone carries around, called that we call them phones, but and it's I think video games as well, and I think the video games that's kind of an interesting segue into transhumanism, because people want to sort of live this fantasy reality that's in this game versus their boring, dull life that they've been, told to stay in a box. So they could go into the virtual box and maybe, go ahead.
Ordinary life where the mantra is same shit, different day. Like you're
Right.
expected to be disappointed with day-to-day reality.
Right. Which is so sad because I mean, I practice mindfulness, uh, and I really enjoy, getting in touch with nature, going for walks and things like this. I think it's really important,
Oh yeah.
even just take out your headphones and just experience all the sounds and the smells and what you're seeing around you, and take note. And the more that you do that, the more weird things kind of shake out in this reality, in this material. You start seeing really interesting things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to. I wish I could reach people who are so addicted to these things, but I don't know if they're reachable.
Well, what we're doing is being documented by a form of media, which more and more am becoming distrustful of media. I'm becoming like a fundamentalist Marshall McLuhanite or something, or a Luddite maybe. I don't know, but
Ooh,
I think that sometimes, and of course, it's like anything. You can take a screwdriver and you could fix something, or you could jab somebody in the chest with it. It's a tool that, in and of itself, is not necessarily harmful,
right.
but media can really be this division between you and real life experience. It's so easy for people to sit and get their quote unquote experience or their knowledge or their whatever through this passive medium instead of going out and exploring the world and poking and prodding in, the interactive theater of life, of this planet,
Yeah.
So I think sometimes, at least what we're doing is accessible to people that if they want to question or walk down a certain avenue, they can do that. And I think more and more that's becoming the case. It's just a very, very slow process. I think
what I also observed, not meaning to interrupt,
No,
but
go.
before I lose the thought, is that I think some people were sort of getting sick of all these social media things. Like some people were like, I don't need Facebook anymore. I have my core group of friends, or I don't need Twitter. I think a lot of people were sort of purging that stuff from their lives. I'd say, maybe 2019. I talked to some friends of mine that were, seriously jaded with all that, concerning all that stuff. And I think what they did with the switch that they flipped was they made it so you have to use this stuff. You have, like you can't, some places you can't like go to a restaurant and not have to like use a QR code, or like you have to use the QR code. So you're like, well, what if I wanted a break from this dumb device that I carry around,
Exactly.
So they've made it so we really just have to now rely more and more on this technology, which, in the end, I don't believe is sustainable whatsoever.
I don't either.
So,
So a different aspect of something that got you into the podcasting world, you said, was sex trafficking. And that kind of leads to the situation that brought both of us together, which is David Seaman. I would like to mention him before we get out of this conversation. But so both of us, separately on our own podcast, did episodes where we interviewed David Seaman, who is the one who basically got fired from HuffPost because he was questioning Hillary Clinton's health. And then somehow that led him down the rabbit hole of discovering Pizzagate and Epstein Island and all that stuff. Your episode got taken off. What was the reason that YouTube gave you for doing that?
Oh, I think it was cyberbullying.
Same here.
And I was like, who am I cyberbullying? Ghislaine Maxwell?
Yeah, exactly. You bullying pedophiles. Come on.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's so insane. So insane.
So, yeah, when Pizzagate broke, I was in Japan at the time. And I was like, that's kind of weird. Like, and this was sort of before I discovered any of the other topics I've delved into in the past, 5 or 6 years. But yeah, when that happened, I was like, like that kind of makes sense though. Like, because you have a lot of these scandals that happen, or at least in one of the most famous one, like the Franklin scandal.
Yes. Yeah.
And then you have that woman, and I put that in a different episode of the Laura Silsby lady. So you have this sort of like human trafficking situation that's been happening. There's a great book by this woman named Lydia Cacho. I can't not remember the title, but it goes into depth about the networks of traffickers. In huge hubs internationally, and it's all mafia and government. Turkey's a great example of that, where they sort of work together to do that. So it all sort of was coming together. I was like, oh wow, Pizzagate is weird.
It is unavoidably weird.
I started looking into all of it, and I started looking into, the art stuff, because Marina Abramovic has always given me the creeps.
Oh yeah.
And, performance art, They're always a strange bunch. I don't know if you know any. Um,
I actually did it back in the mid 80s
did
myself,
you?
but yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Well, I mean, it seems like it would be fun, but
sure.
she takes it to like a whole level where you're like, oh, I'm, yeah. And I knew some people in the art world who had told me, other like when she hires these people, that famous video where it's got all the people's heads on these platters, like they're basically kneeling under a table, I guess, to put their head through this hole. And she does not treat those people well at all. And then you see what she did to Lady Gaga, which is basically like abusive, weird programming.
What did she do?
Um,
I'm not familiar with that.
so Lady Gaga was like losing her inspiration or something, right? So she goes to Marina Abramovic to reclaim some inspiration, I suppose. She makes her go stand in the woods naked, with a blindfold, find your way back, that kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
So she's a great lady.
sure.
Um yeah. So yeah, you just start looking at all these really strange characters that are involved. And again, it's not a huge club. It really isn't.
No.
People who are in that upper echelon. And you have to think those people they have everything they could ever want,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
And yeah, go ahead.
It's no, it's just, it is really, it's literally another level of reality that most of us
Mhm.
can't even begin to comprehend.
Not at all.
Yeah. They don't have to deal
So
with any of the factors of life that most of us have to deal with on a day-to-day basis.
no. And so I think what happens, and I don't know, but somehow they all become really depraved. I guess out of just sheer boredom with their well going lives. Like, I don't know. And I think there's definitely a pedophilic element to Hollywood. I think that's pretty clear. Um, and I think, yeah, sex trafficking is a huge issue, and we don't talk about it. And we pretend like there's no such thing as slavery anymore, but there is.
Absolutely, absolutely. I find it interesting. A friend of mine, just recently pointed me to an article that came out in Upworthy about how the QAnon people who are shouting about all these pedophilia rings involving Hollywood and politicians and stuff like that. Not only are those conspiracy theories, quote unquote, wrong, but they are harmful because they take away the resources that would usually be allotted to finding the real child and sex traffickers, uh, because all these people are sent on wild goose chases, which I I had never heard of that tactic before of downplaying this stuff, but I thought that was an interesting one. I've never heard of any group of feds rushing to some place that some QAnon person was tweeting about. Like,
Right.
is that a thing?
Well, even if the feds do anything, uh, because I mean, you had a guest, you had Tracy Twyman on your show,
Hmm.
and she went to them
Yeah.
um, with some of the things that she had found, and unfortunately, she's now passed away,
Yes.
and I don't know how or why, but it just seems that anyone who gets a little too close to the sex trafficking cabal, let's say, it's a dangerous kind of topic. And yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. The FBI just doesn't seem to be doing its job at all. And I think that's a silly argument.
I
Um,
think so too.
yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think the thing with this system, yeah, it's a system. So you have to think of like the logistics and everything that's involved in transporting humans, across borders. And it has to be pretty powerful people. And I think it's very sad. I think a lot of these organizations are actually deeply embedded in the trafficking.
I agree.
And that's just something I think. I don't have, I would have to do more research on that. But it just seems, well, part of the reason I think that is because we're talking about what I call the Orwellian term known as sex work. And I think that's a way to soften the idea of prostitution, the idea of someone being sold or having to sell themselves. Because if money wasn't there, these things probably wouldn't be happening. The women that supposedly choose to do this stuff, which I don't really even buy that so much. But so the reason what I'm getting at is that the UN, all these global institutions use these really strange Orwellian terms like sex work or gender identity, or, I mean, those are just the two that I can come up with off the top of my head here. And it really does. It sort of does this weird reversal, oh, it's not so bad, it's not, these women, and then you have some of the people who think, these women deserve it. And that's also just pretty sick.
Exactly.
So, and so like, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Please. No. Please continue your thought.
I don't have any.
Well, it sounds like we're implying that these are maybe just teenage girls or something like that, but it's
right,
also
just
children.
Webcam. Yeah, no.
Yeah, it's children too. Young children. And then there's the nefarious aspect of it too that I think is what loses many people, is the trauma-based adrenochrome aspect and all of that stuff. And I don't personally know what to think of that either. It sounds far out and it sounds nightmarish. That doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, though. So I don't know.
I'm on the fence. I'm pretty agnostic concerning that topic, but I'm not agnostic. I do think there is a satanic cult running Hollywood. I really do. And I think even if it isn't satanic, it's an inversion of things that, we have been seeing them exploit children. And, when you rewatch these films, and I cannot come up with a good example right now, but you're just sort of like, what? Like, I mean, I just rewatched Weird Science.
Yeah, I heard your video about that. Yes.
And I was just like, wow, there's a lot of weird, like, kind of pedophilic undertones here. And I think it's part of the whole plan. I mean, part of my stance is I think they want to control people with their libido. I think there's a humiliation ritual aspect that goes on in a lot of these movies where you're like, well, that was a humiliating scene. Why would they make that person do that? Why would they write that in? And why aren't we seeing stories? We see the same stories over and over and over again. And why aren't we seeing, just even an everyday story? Like, here's a woman who lives in this place. And I guess that's kind of what reality TV does, but not really, because those are all the producers sort of like whispers, you should do this to fight with this person. And
exactly,
it's not really like reality.
Yeah. Well, and it's all edited down to some comprehensible 30-minute chunk.
Right.
Yeah.
So there aren't, I just don't see films that are speaking. I don't know what is the audience for some of these things. And there's like, I would call them sort of like neo-brutalists, like Aronofsky's one that comes to the top of my mind here.
What is that?
Just Darren Aronofsky, the director. He's just sort of I don't know if you've seen any of his films, but they're brutal. And it's just like these torturous scenes where a lot of times it's women, like, and you're just Mother. That's one of the ones I watched where I was like, why?
I haven't seen. I stayed away from that one because
I did too for a while. That I was like bored, and so I put it on. And part of the reason now for me watching movies, and this kind of made them more fun, actually, to like notice the weird symbolism and these, strange messages that I feel like they're putting out. So it's, I don't know.
Well, there's an interesting book with somebody that's written by somebody that's been on my show quite a few times, and I'm going to interview him for this book that I'm about to mention to you called 16 Maps of Hell. And it's all about the Hollywood superculture. And it's a lot of what this guy's work is about is this superculture that he feels that the mainstream culture is embedded within, and that the values from that superculture socio-engineer the culture that we are informed by. Yet it doesn't live by the same values as that culture.
No.
And one thing that he ties in is Hollywood culture. And there is an adage that started back when Hitchcock was making movies, and his motto was torture the women. That's what it's about, is torturing the women. And
it's wild, yeah.
Yeah. He ties that in. He ties Roman Polanski and the Manson murders together, Rosemary's Baby. Oh, it's great
I should
stuff.
get that. That sounds fascinating.
It's great stuff. Yeah, I highly recommend it. Yeah. Hopefully I'm going to be talking to him about that book sometime in the next couple of weeks, but I think you would totally dig it.
Yeah, I would.
It's good stuff.
So does he think, and I mean, just as maybe a little teaser, this is my personal idea, and this is sort of as just an aside, and I would also have to, again, do some more reading, but part of me thinks that the Manson murder of Sharon Tate was a satanic sacrifice.
Well,
yeah.
He brings that up, but he more implies that Polanski and Hollywood as sort of a subculture is more responsible for that than the Manson family was. And that was more to cover up some things that were some nefarious activities that were already going on in that subculture, which was orgies.
Lots of prostitution, yeah.
Yes.
And orgies, right.
All documented, all to implicate people.
Right.
Tons of drugs, mob connections, organized crime. Yeah. And that it was really Tex Watson that was more behind putting those murders into play than Manson was. Manson was a perfect stool pigeon because he was a nutcase. Like nobody, he was such an easy scapegoat.
A racist nutcase.
Well, he thinks, and I've heard other people say this too, that was a totally invented narrative, this race war, starting this race war. And
yeah, probably. I mean, my thoughts are that maybe Manson was some sort of intelligence asset.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I think also
MK Ultra.
Yes, and he was involved in the Process Church.
Yes.
And I don't know if you've ever read The Ultimate Evil.
No.
But that's an interesting one about the son of Sam and how this I think it's Maury Terry might be the author's name. I believe he's passed away now, but it's a pretty accessible book. I think I have a PDF version of it, but yeah, basically his theory was that the Process Church was operating all of this stuff, and they were the ones that were telling, working with David Berkowitz and Charles Manson, and like sort of operating this weird murder syndicate.
Exactly. So, he brings that up too, and I've also heard that mentioned in other places, but the Process Church supposedly also carried out hits on people or on groups of people, but they were experts at making them look like ritual killings, making them look like there was something else, writing shit on the walls in blood, stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I find that interesting.
It is interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's cool. I'll look forward to that for sure.
Yeah. Jasun Horsley.
I've heard of him. I don't remember why his name came up recently, but I was looking at his website, and I believe he had I'll send you the link. It was a really interesting looking podcast about something that was up my alley. Yes. That's his podcast, right?
Yeah. Great podcast. My girlfriend's actually been on that podcast before.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And
you're just a family of podcasters.
Well, she used to be a part of the cult of Carlos Castaneda.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. About 15, 20 years ago. And he is very into Carlos Castaneda and all the dark underpinnings of that whole group. And she had a lot to say about that. So they had a conversation. And I actually had both of them on my podcast to talk about that too. But then
I must have missed that one. I'll try to
yeah,
look through your archive.
yes. Yeah, I highly recommend his stuff. He's really got his finger on the pulse of a lot of interesting intersection of lots of things that really connect together, and it makes total sense the way he draws them together. Yeah, I'll send you links too.
Great.
Yes.
Do you have any? I don't know how long we've even been doing this. It's kind of fun to just chat with you.
Yeah, likewise. But I should probably draw it to a close anyway, and we can always get back to all these subjects and more.
I know there's so many subjects. That's why I think part of the reason I started the podcast too is because I was like, wow, there's like endless material for this.
Exactly.
So I'm never barefoot of of material.
For sure. I think we've been talking for about an hour and 15 minutes.
Great.
Hour and 20, something like that. Yeah.
And I mean, I'm almost like, curse you, Chris Snipes, because now I'm like really doing this sort of Tracy Twyman rabbit hole. I'm just like, whoa. I've been listening to a lot of her stuff. And like, actually, I got in touch with the guy that they were doing all those live streams with.
Yes.
In 2019.
Uh-huh.
So we might have a chat.
Oh, good. Fantastic.
Because I find that interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to put this in because flat Earth is a risky topic.
No, put it in, please.
But I mean, I'm again agnostic towards that. But her idea about what it would be and like sort of this like realm above it or whatever, like if we're on a disc or something.
Hyper kingdoms.
Right.
Yeah.
It's fascinating stuff. So,
incredibly.
Yeah. And I really do. I believe there are souls. Yeah, for sure. And I do think they leave your body and we don't know where they go. And I think some of them get trapped here, which might explain, ghost kind of phenomena. And I definitely believe in ghosts. I feel like I've never seen anything, but I've had very strange feelings. Something just feels a little not right here.
Well, I think that there's different kinds of ghosts.
I've heard that too.
Yeah, some that are interactive, some that are more loops.
Right. Yeah, I've heard the loop one where they just they do the same thing that they would have been doing if they were living.
Yeah. And they're really kind of oblivious to interaction or communication or anything like that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, there's an interesting sort of mini series of documentaries on Netflix now called Surviving Death, based on a book by Leslie.
Interesting title.
Yeah. Based on a book by Leslie Kane. She's also been on my podcast. A great episode, great conversation. But it's got a lot of really compelling evidence, I would say, for all these things. There's a couple of episodes about mediums. There's one on communication with the dead. There's one on people who've had near-death experiences, and it's just pretty amazing stuff. It's hard. It would be hard to watch that and not think that's something, that we don't just stop when our
right
physical meat suit dies.
Exactly. I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
But yeah, I'd love to chat again anytime. And any of these topics like really are just, again, I'm sort of always this person that's just looking kind of from the outside in. I have some opinions. Some of them are strong. But for the most part, I'm more just interested in what people believe and what they think and
Me too.
What's going on and what is the meaning of this? So
Agreed. Totally agreed.
And it makes life more fun.
And I think once you stop, you come to topics that you refuse to listen to. I think that's where you kind of need to lean in and listen
Right.
more,
Yeah.
like why exclude anything? I mean, not that I'm going to have a neo-Nazi on or anything like that, but people have ideas that aren't viewed as valid by the mainstream. This certainly does. I mean, maybe there's a reason that they're not seen as valid. Maybe there's
Well,
something behind
I
that.
think the reason is because, well, for the three that I can come up with, so we'll end the show after this.
Okay.
The three things that I was gonna do a show about like demonizing different perspectives. I wasn't sure what the last word would have been, but let's take transgenderism, vaccinations, and climate change. These are like the three things if you think, well, I don't know about climate change, or oh, I don't know about vaccinations, or 5G, that's another one. I feel like they put these narratives out to make people questioning these things look like crackpots.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yes.
so I really I've been delving more into, because I didn't think about any of this stuff. I was like, yeah, sure, the earth is totally dying and it's awful, and I do believe, yeah, there's an aspect of that that's true,
Sure.
but I don't know. So it's something I want to look into more. The vaccination thing, that's fascinating to me. I haven't had a vaccination since I was a kid, and it was like the basic one that you would get in the 80s. And I don't know, I haven't had a flu shot ever, I don't
Yeah.
think,
Me either.
because I don't see the need for one.
Yeah.
If I do get sick, I'm a pretty healthy person. My body is pretty okay,
Yes.
you know?
You'll live through it,
So,
and it'll make your immune system better.
right. And so they have to do this so that they can demonize people and their questioning of these mainstream narratives. 5G, I don't know a lot about the conspiracy surrounding it, but it does seem kind of weird. It seems like, yeah, we are doing okay with the Internet of Things now. I don't know. Yeah, maybe I am a Luddite. I don't know. But like, it just doesn't seem like this progress is actually progress.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to put that.
Well, it's a progress of tools. It's not a progress of mind. We're not evolving our intellect or anything, our spirituality or our empathy or anything having to do with the non-material. It's just material progress. And
Right.
that empty of everything else, empty of anything worthwhile behind it, that's useless, like that's not real evolution. To
Yeah.
me, that's my opinion.
I think I'd agree with you there.
All
So,
right. Well, sign up for my newsletter. No, I'm just kidding.
yeah.
Send your checks to.
I wish I was that motivated to
Yeah,
have
yeah,
a
exactly.
newsletter.
Same here.
Oh, no. No.
Well, to round this up, why can you tell the listeners where they can listen to your fantastic podcast and find you online?
Right. So on YouTube, it's just Dystopian Deep Dives, which actually a friend of mine came up with that name. So it's not even something that I came up with, but I really liked it. And I was like, that's a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my podcast is on a lot of different platforms. I've tried to make it's definitely on Apple. And it's on SoundCloud. And then I have a website, dystopiandeepdives.com, which is it's just usually hosting the podcast. I was sort of I used to write a lot of poetry. So I was like, oh, well, maybe I'll blog again. And then I wasn't really doing that. So you can check it out there. But
Cool.
it's pretty much basically wherever I think you can find a podcast. If you just Google it now,
Fabulous.
it should come up.
Well,
Yeah.
I will also put links in the episode notes too, so people can just click there and go find it. Yes. Thank you, Natalie, for coming on the podcast. It was
Thank you,
a
Chris.
blast. Well, let's
Cool.
do it again in the near future, and
Cool.
have a good evening, Natalie.
Bye-bye.
If you like what you've heard and would like to contribute to The Melt, there are a few ways that you can do so. The most tangible way would be financially by clicking the Patreon link in the episode notes, and there you will find a multitude of ways that you can help for as little as $1 a month. This helps to keep making The Melt better, pay the bills, and help to make this podcast my full-time job that I can fully devote my time to and give you more content. Another way of helping would be by going to wherever it is that you subscribe to The Melt and give it a favorable review or rating that will help to get it out to more people. And lastly, if neither of those options are readily available, simply send your good thoughts and intentions. In an interconnected and quantumly entangled multiverse, these also go a long way. Thank you.